Hello everyone and welcome back to Simply Dark. In today's episode we are going to discuss the very strange, mysterious and bizarre case of Don Decker, the Rain Man. And this is actually the first episode in this series where we are going to talk about paranormal experiences. So if you guys are into those kind of stuff, buckle up because we're gonna get started. Today's incredible story began on the 24th of February 1983 after Don Decker's grandfather passed away. Don was in jail at the time of his grandfather's death, but was granted permission to attend the funeral and spend a few days with the family. And you see, while others were, very upset and sad with everything that was going on, Don was actually feeling a sense of peace for the very first time. Because what the others didn't know was that James, Don's grandfather, had physically abused Don since he was a little child. So these were years and years of being abused by your own grandfather. Unfortunately, Don's sense of peace wouldn't last for long. After James' funeral, Don stayed the night with Bob and Jenny Kafer. And I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing their surname right, but it's just too hard. They were friends of the family and they were quite fond of Don. It was later that evening that Don started to feel that something wasn't right. A deep chill began to grip him and Don quickly fell into a trance-like state. Soon after this, the Kefers, not quite understanding what was going on, suddenly noticed water coming down the ceiling and the walls. They immediately called the landlord to check out what was going on with the water pipes in the house. His name was Ron Van Wy, and when he arrived to the house, he too didn't have any answers of what was going on. Ron knew that there was no water pipes in the places where the water was coming out. In fact, a little bit after, the leaks starting to get even worse and there was water coming from the floor as well. Unsure of what to do, Ron decided to call his wife, who later told him to call the police. Patrolman Richard Wolbert was the first one to arrive to the property, and it only took a few minutes for Richard to become drenched in water as soon as he got into the house. And this is what Richard had to say about it. We were standing just inside the front door and met this droplet of water traveling horizontally. It passed between us and just traveled out into the next room. Officer John Bajan, who was there too, also witnessed all of this, and he said, "I literally had a chill going up my spine, made the hair stand up on your neck. That's how I felt. This was a situation where things were happening that I never ever dreamed could possibly happen. And there was no way of explaining what was going on." As the officers tried to make any sense of what was happening at that moment, they noticed Don that was in a corner, still in a trance-like state. The officers asked the Kefers to take Don out of the house and just take him to a pizzeria across the street. As soon as Don and the Kefers left the house, the home went back to normal straight away. And at that moment, Ron started to wondering if this had actually something to do with Don or even the Kefers. Pam Scrofano, the owner of the pizzeria, said that she saw Don coming in and then he looked to be like in a zombie kind of state. And moments after the Kefers and Don sat down, the same thing started to happen to the pizzeria. So basically, water started falling again from the ceilings through the walls. Water began to fall on their heads and spread across the floor. Seeing this, Pom immediately suspected that Dawn was possessed. So she ran to her register and pulled out a crucifix that she later on placed on Dawn's skin. Dawn reacted immediately, and it was apparent that the crucifix was burning his skin. At this point, it was no longer possible to stay at the pizzeria anymore, so they all decided to get back to their home to try and figure out what to do next. And obviously, as soon as they left the pizzeria, everything was back to normal. Everything was fine. So when they returned home, the landlord and his wife were still there, and as soon as he got inside the house, everything started to happen again. So water on the walls, raining, water on the floor. But this time, that wasn't the only thing that was happening. In the kitchen, all the pans they had inside the kitchen cupboard were actually starting to move and rackle. At this point, Ron and his wife had enough, and they decided to confront Dawn. They thought Dawn was doing some kind of prank, and that this prank was actually damaging their property. Then things took a dramatic turn. While Ron and his wife were still talking about all that was happening in their home, Dawn started levitating off the ground and was forcefully pushed against the wall by an unseen force. Not long after this, officers Bajan and Walbert came back to the property with their police chief. Unable to identify any foul playing by Dawn's part, he told the officers that it was a plumbing problem and that no further investigation was needed. Perhaps due to curiosity, the police officers decided to ignore their chief and returned to the house the next day just to check if everything was okay. When the officers arrived, they were pleased to see that everything looked back to normal. But still, one of the officers decided to conduct his own little experiment, and he pulled out a golden crucifix and placed it in Dawn's hands. Then Dawn stated that the crucifix was burning him, so the officer decided to take the crucifix away. As soon as the cross was put away, the officers saw Dawn levitate once again and fly against an interior wall. And this is how John Rundle, one of the officers, described the incident. All of a sudden, he lifted up off the ground and he flew across the room with the force as though a buzz had hit him. There were 3 claw marks on the side of his neck, which drew blood. I have no answer for it whatsoever, and I just draw a blank even today. Ron, the landlord, then decided that he wanted to help Dawn because he realized that Dawn wasn't making it on purpose and that he actually appeared to be spiritually troubled. Ron called every preacher in town and it was declined by almost all of them. Eventually, one came to the house and prayed with Dawn. As they prayed together, Dawn would start, all these convulsions, but the longer they prayed, the more peaceful Dawn looked. Once the prayers were over, Dawn looked a lot more like himself, and all the raining and water and all the strange things happening stopped. After all this, it was then time to go back to jail because obviously it was only granted a few days to stay with the family. While he was in his cell, Dawn started to think, what if I can make it rain in here? And as soon as he had this thought, the water started dripping from the ceiling. And oh my god, I have goosebumps all over because this is so creepy. Dawn could actually control the rain. Like, how insane is that? However, the prison guard, while doing his rounds, wasn't happy to see Dawn's cell floating up. Dawn explained to the guard that he was the one that made rain inside the cell, and obviously the guard didn't believe him whatsoever and sarcastically challenged him to make it rain in the warden's office. And Dawn just replied, "Okay, I will do it." So the guard made his way to the warden's office, and when he got there, he saw Kinhold sitting alone at his desk. The guard then looked around the office to see if there was any water dripping down the walls or in the ceiling, on the floor, and he couldn't find anything. But when he had a closer look at Kinhold, his shirt was soaking wet, like dripping water. The guard later stated, "I was just saturated with water. I was startled, I was scared, and I just didn't have an explanation why it happened." Kinhold, finally understanding what was going on, called his friend Reverend William Blackburn and urgently asked him to come and see Dawn Decker. Upon being briefed on everything that was happening, the Reverend accused Dawn of making everything up. Dawn wasn't obviously happy about this, and soon after that, the cell started to stink. A very, very bad odor that it smelled like death. And then the rain reappeared once again. It was a misty rain, and it was described by the Reverend as the devil's rain. The Reverend finally understood what was going on. He did indeed believe Dawn and started praying for him. He stayed in Dawn's cell for hours, praying with him, and finally it happened. The rain stopped. As soon as everything was back to normal, Dawn Decker broke down into tears, and whatever was affecting him did not come back again. Dawn later on stated that it was hopeful that this would never happen to him again, and also said that his grandfather abused him once and he had the chance to abuse him again, but that now all he wants is peace. And this is everything I have for you guys. So what do you think? Do you believe in what I just said? Do you believe this story? Do you think it's true? Do you think it was made up? To be honest, I don't know what to believe, because I kind of don't want to believe that it's true, because it really freaks me out, this kind of stuff. But at the same time, there are so many witnesses that saw this happen. I don't know, it just gives me the creeps, and this is definitely the kind of stories that really intrigue me, but at the same time I don't like to look too much into it because it scares me to death. But yeah, still I thought this would be a very interesting unsolved case for me to share with you guys. I'm pretty sure a lot of you already heard about this before. If you did, please let me know in the comments below. But if, like me, you didn't know, I hope you enjoyed watching this. If yes, please give this episode a thumbs up. It really helps my channel to grow. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!